Joshua. Should be lesson 76, I think there, yeah. Oh, so not Joshua. Sorry, Judges. All right, so here's Bible. Judges chapter 1. Lesson 76, Introduction to the Book of Judges. So it's an introduction. I'm not going to get into specific judges here. And we're going to read parts of Judges 1 and 2. And we'll take a kind of a different route with the book of Judges here at the beginning. We do an introduction. And then we look at some of the sins that were going on in Israel that caused them to need for God to have to send judges. And that's kind of way over towards the end of the book of Judges. And then we come back eventually to Judges chapter 3, and we start studying and looking at the individual judges that God sent. So first, an introduction, then the next lesson will be the need, and then we'll start looking at individual judges. So, Judges chapter 1, take a look at a few of the verses here. Start reading there at verse 1 of chapter 1. Now after the death of Joshua, it came to pass that the children of Israel asked the Lord, saying, Who shall go up for us against the Canaanites, first to fight against them? And the Lord said, Judah shall go up. Behold, I have delivered the land into his hand. And Judah said unto Simeon his brother, Come up with me into my lot, that we may fight against the Canaanites, and I likewise will go with thee into thy lot. So Simeon went with him. And Judah went up, and the Lord delivered the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hand, and they slew of them in Bezek 10,000 men. And they found Adoni-Bezek in Bezek, and they fought against him, and they slew the Canaanites and the Perizzites. So, question is, the Israelites want to know, if Joshua's dead, who's our next leader? They don't need a leader like Moses and Joshua anymore. They don't need a king like the surrounding nations. The Lord is their king. God has given his written word to be their guide. They could live individually as tribes perfectly, obeying God's law, living a life of holiness without a leader, and things would have been all right. And that's what the Lord tells them. They want to know, who will fight for us? Who's going to be our leader? And the Lord says, Judah. Judah can go. The whole nation of Judah needs to fight. Sure, in battle there's probably going to need to be one man of the tribe of Judah who gives direction. Otherwise, you would just have people doing their own thing. And that's what we want to actually take a look at here, because that's going to be a problem. Jump to Judges chapter 2. Look at verse 10. I'll read that there. And also, all the generations were gathered unto their fathers, and there arose another generation after them, which knew not the Lord, nor the works which he had done for Israel. What does that mean? That means the generation that had entered into Canaan, the ones who marched around Jericho, maybe as young men or young children even, and saw the walls come tumbling down. The ones who were in the battle of Ai or had witnessed the battle of Ai saw the wonder and hand of God there. The Israelites who had been alive to defeat those 5 kings when the Lord had sent hailstones to defeat them. they were no longer alive, these groups that had seen those wonders and miracles. So a younger generation that was born after all of those miracles and wonders were done, they grew up. Now their parents, the godly ones, taught their children about the Lord. That's not what this means here, this text. It doesn't mean that they didn't know who God was. They knew exactly who God was. They knew what that temple was there for in Shiloh. They knew how they were supposed to worship and sacrifice Him. But they didn't see the miracles, the signs and wonders. And so they begin to no longer worship Jehovah. Instead, these new young people who are now growing up and becoming mothers and fathers themselves begin to imitate the wicked Canaanites by worshiping idols. They serve Baal. They serve Ashtaroth. Baal was the sun god. Ashtaroth was his female partner. And each tribe had its own kind of idol and statue that it might worship for Baal and Ashtaroth, along with all kinds of other gods. Just like the Egyptians, there were probably all kinds of wicked ceremonies and activities, dancing and drunkenness, that took place with the worship of these gods. And that is what these children began to imitate. Many of them began to worship in their own ways, the way that they wanted. Now there were still, and there always will be, a faithful remnant in Israel. But the question is for us, for you as young people, your mothers and fathers, how they probably didn't witness any great miracles, any sudden healing of someone or walls of a whole town falling down. But your parents, they too were taught love and desire for the Lord. They are teaching you, you know who God is, but who will you be like? Will you be like these Israelites who know the Lord? You know about Him and who He is, but the ways of the world are more tempting to you. I don't need to know my catechism. I've got better things to do. I don't need to go to church, Bible study. I've got more important things to do. Why have devotions? I can just listen along at the dinner table and that will be good enough. That's exactly what's happening here to these people. And then when they grow older and have their own independence, they have established no good habits. The ways of the world are more tempting and pleasing to them. So I pray that that you are not like these next generation that knows not the Lord. That would be terrible. It would be disappointing. Thankfully, God always has His remnant, though. So Judah, we see here, calls out their brother Simeon, and they go out and they fight against these nations that are surrounding them, and they win. They kill 10,000 of them. But then we see Judah begins to become weak. They become afraid. They begin to see the ways of the wicked. And so, rather than fighting against them, we'll try. Small battle takes place. But they don't want to die. Wouldn't it be much easier just to let the Canaanites or whichever tribe it may be stay there so that they can stay? And then let's not fight them. And that way we won't die. So that's what happens. Initially, we see the vigor, but almost immediately it dies out. Fear of death, a lack of willpower, desire to continue being faithful to God's command to drive out the Canaanites begins to disappear. And the Israelites allow them to live in the land, make peace with them, cooperate with them, get along with them. And again, these young children then grow up in a land where their fathers and mothers aren't saying, let's get rid of these wicked heathens, let's drive them out of the land, let's battle them. No, rather mom and dad are doing business with them. They're visiting them, spending time with them. And so the children think, well, there's nothing wrong with doing any of that. And they begin to see, maybe go over to their Canaanite, you could almost call them friend's house now. And they see the idols, and they see the fun parties that go on to worship those idols, the festivals, and they sure look fun. And they begin to go over there and join in those festivals, and soon they're living just like them. Turn to chapter 2. Read a few verses here about what the Lord does. Chapter 2, sorry, I said verse 2, right? Chapter 2 of Judges, verse 1. And the angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I made you to go up out of Egypt and have brought you unto the land which I swear unto your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And ye shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. Ye shall throw down their altars, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have ye done this? Wherefore I also said, I will not drive them out from before you, but they shall be as thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare unto you. And if came to pass when the angel of the Lord spake these words unto all the children of Israel, that the people lifted up their voice and wept, and they called the name of that place Bochim, and they sacrificed there unto the Lord. Who is this angel? We can assume once again it is the Old Testament Christ, who appears to the people to come to talk to them. God wanted to talk to them. Where does this take place? Probably pretty close by to the Jordan River, where those pillars had been set up to remind them of God's faithfulness. How could it be possible, the Lord, that you says to them that you forgot me so soon? Well, when one is caught up in the pleasures of this world, when one does not establish good habits of honoring and worshiping and communing with God, soon the cares of this world swallows him up. It's like those seeds that Jesus talks about in the parable that fall in amongst the weeds, and for a time they grow up, but very quickly are swallowed up with the cares of this world. So the angel of Jehovah rebukes him here, because ye have made a league with them. You've become friends with them. You haven't destroyed their altars, but rather you worship their gods at their altars. You have not driven them from the land. So God says, this shall be your punishment. I will not drive them from the land either. I will allow them to live here just as you have allowed them to live here, and they will be thorns in your sides. They will be a pain to you, a nuisance. They will make your lives miserable. And their gods uses the word snare. We might say trap. Think of an animal trap that we put a little bait on so that an animal comes up and its foot gets stuck in it, or it gets caught in the trap, in the cage. It's the same here for Israel. Those gods, they'll be a trap for you. They'll be tempting and tantalizing and looking good. And you'll fall right into those sins of worshiping their gods. That is your punishment. Your neighbors are going to overtake you even. You will be their servants. Remember how the Gibeonites were the servants of you? You're going to be now the servants of them. Oh, you like the worship of their idols and gods? You don't need me? I will let you go your own way for a time. See how that goes. And then, when you realize how bad things are, you will come running back to me. These people mourn. They sacrifice there. Caused them to weep. They were sad. Maybe some of them were only sad about the bad things that they heard were going to happen, just like many kings in the Bible who are ungodly. They hear about the bad things and they weep and they're sad about them, but it doesn't cause them to repent. It doesn't cause them to say they're sorry. It doesn't cause them to turn from their sin and worship Jehovah. Oh, there's a faithful remnant. God's people are still in Israel. You can imagine those people going back to their homes and weeping, mourning, not just for a little bit, but day in and day out. Because they too will have to suffer along with their ungodly neighbors in Israel. God will not destroy his people, his remnant. There will always be a faithful remnant. The others, the ungodly, they weep there, but then they probably go back home and say, well, why don't we live it up? Why don't we have fun for a season? Because we're going to be punished anyways. Why don't we make it as fun as possible with the time we have left? This lesson is an important lesson for me and for you about how we need to be careful not to be tempted by the world and all of its pleasures and living with the world and doing what it does and thinking, well, it's not that bad. Because if you slowly allow it to creep in, maybe one day when you are parents, it will be even easier for your children to allow it to creep in too. So there is that faithful flock. God will be faithful unto them. He promised them. Ultimately, Jesus will have the ultimate victory on the cross. Although Israel had a few victories, many of them now they don't even care about having a victory. But there will be one ultimate victory eventually. That's Jesus when he dies on the cross to save his people from their sins. And now we look forward to his coming again. So there may come a day when we too have to suffer. Maybe we read in Revelations of what the end times will be like. And our lives will be miserable like these Israelites too, with a wicked world surrounding us. But we must not fall into their sins and their temptations and the wickedness that the devil tempts us with. We have to be strong. We have to be faithful. Thankfully, we have God's word for that. Thankfully, we have good, godly preachers that encourage us to do that.